So in communications between me and the other two survivors from Manly, of course, none of us were surprised that he'd reoffended. So that was all in November 2012. In December of that year, I discovered that Atma from Rockland was conducting a program at Ishani House, the centre run by and his girlfriend. There'd also been another incident where Swami Satyadharma, it was around the same time, Swami Satyadharma went and conducted a program there. She was invited by Kriya Vidya, I believe. So in December 2012, I contacted Jai Atma to complain about the fact that Atma was not only conducting a program there, but widely advertising it on Facebook. And it was being endorsed by Satyananda-yoga Rockland. So Jai Atma responded and said that she would contact Atma. There was a bit of backwards and forwards communications between various people, but ultimately Atma cancelled the program. I had to re-complain because even though she'd officially cancelled the program on Facebook, it still looked like the Rockland Yoga Ashram was actively endorsing Ishani House. And so there was a lot of backwards and forwards in getting that changed, which eventually did happen. So it was also around that time when Jai Atma had been convinced by Jane that they really needed to take stronger action against. And she basically had to convince other people at Mangrove. So it was kind of like she was the only one who we had managed to get through to, and she was kind of on her own, and she had to really argue a case because of course she couldn't make the decision on her own. So that was quite some time, quite some disagreement about that, I believe. Just as another example of how being in Melbourne cramped my style, I basically couldn't go to any yoga events here in Melbourne for fear that he would be there. Even outside of Melbourne. So there's a thing called Yoga Camp, which is out in the country where it's organised by another Satyananda-yoga teacher, and I wanted to go, but I had to email him and explain to him the situation to request that I not be allowed to attend so that I could attend. And that was just one of many, many similar things that I was constantly having to manage. And essentially, I would say, in the 2.5 years that it took for me to convince the people at Mangrove to take strong action against and stop actively supporting him, like Satyadharma and Atma were, I pretty much stayed at home. I was pretty much in hiding because he was around and he was involved in yoga things here in Melbourne. So that meant I couldn't be. So not only had I lost my community in Mangrove and Manly, I came to this town after I hadn't lived here for 10 years, and it was virtually impossible for me to establish myself with a new community and meet new friends and be involved in yoga things here. April 2013, conveniently after the gathering at Rockland for Satsanghi's visit when everyone was together, I received an email from Jai Atma. She also forwarded it to the other two survivors from Manly. Hari Om all, I hope this email finds you well. This is a short note to let you know that SYA has concluded its review on the behaviour of and has permanently cancelled his accreditation. SYA has also implemented a lifetime ban on him visiting Mangrove or Rockland. So yeah, 2.5 years that took. 2.5 years of hell. This is a response, communications between, I was communicating at this time with and Manly. And she wrote this to me, or to me and to and Jayatma. Dear all, I would probably say 2 years too late, but better now than not at all. I would also say that SYA lost a valuable opportunity 2 years ago to show what it really stands for. I am grateful to hear that this has finally happened, and sorry that 3 voices that spoke out 2 years ago were not enough for SYA to take a stand and to show their community that their commitment is to truth. I lost all respect for SYA then, and this does little to restore my faith. It took another woman, one that we know of, for this action to be taken. I can only hope that as an organisation, something has been learned. Later that year, in October 2013, I heard a rumour that had been allowed to move into the Mungir ashram with Swami Niranjan in India. I wrote to Jayatma to ask her if she could confirm this for me. I had no idea whether he was still in Melbourne or not. I was still hiding. But he had left. No one had bothered to tell me that. She assured me that they had not made any changes to the bans that they had implemented on but that they didn't apply in India. She says that we did inform Mungir of the ban, but as you may be aware, they're not always responsive to suggestions from others. And Swamiji may have his own reasons for allowing to visit. So this was a pretty big shock for me, that we finally had this kind of bittersweet victory here in Australia, but the Swami Niranjan would take him in. In December that year, I received a message from you, Yoga Sundam. I was pretty pissed off with you. Not so much about the message. What really hurt me was that I know that you were one of the first people who was informed about what was going on with and I was really disappointed that you never, ever reached out to me, acknowledged what had happened, or even just asked if I was okay. I didn't hear from you, I didn't get a phone call, I didn't get an email. And you're not the only one, you're one of many. But that really hurt. So when I received that message from you out of the blue saying, hey, come to Mangrove for our Easter celebrations, I was like, you know what, fuck you. So pretty much, whatever well-intentioned message you may have composed, it wasn't going to go down well. About a few months later, March 2014, all of the stuff about the ashram kids came out in public. Well, for me it came out, it may have been for others earlier, but I had purposely, long ago, years earlier, I wasn't on... Yeah, I'm off the database, guys, I don't want to know. Wasn't on their Facebook, anything, so it was only it was a while later through chance that through Facebook I became aware that there was something going down and became aware that the ashram kids had come forward with their stories of horrendous abuse, and so my automatic response was to get into contact with those people, which I did, and have found them, that group, to be more supportive than anyone from Mangrove ever has been. And from that time when I first became aware of their existence, in about March 2014, Right up until now, I'm in regular communication with a number of those people. And was very closely following the whole Royal Commission process. And have found that between me and them, we have a lot in common. We've had a lot of similar experiences, and that enables us to feel quite supported by each other and quite connected in our experience of the yoga ashram. So hence, every time you guys fucked up, it hurt me too. I could really feel, what those people were going through, and found the whole process pretty agonising in terms of how they were being treated by the ashram. When I received the emails from Bhakti and Mary Smith, I was cheering for them. And I was pissed off with the response from the ashram to those emails and to the ashram kids. You know, this email that came through in March 2014 from the Working Together group, saying the use of your email address for that purpose was illegal and claims expressed were defamatory. You should not have been subject to those messages, and please be assured that Satyananda-yoga is taking appropriate action to prevent any escalation or repetition of this behaviour. Blah, blah, blah. We're working to the task force has a sankalpa to, number one, protect the work of Satyananda-yoga from the destabilising effects of past acts of abuse and their continuing effect. In relation to the malicious, unsolicited emails that you received, it is essential to remember that the disturbing allegations and suggestions are hearsay only. The Satyananda-yoga movement introduced significant safeguards to ensure that it can't happen again. Remembering the positives, we don't even know the real identity of Mary Smith, yet her anger has disturbed and upset the peace of many dedicated teachers. Her message is clear on only one aspect, that what it says is based on stories from another person and is not from her experience. It is essentially a bubble of negativity. I love that line. Who wrote that seriously? A bubble of negativity? It should not counteract our own positive experience of yoga. Someone who feels they have been subject to inappropriate conduct has a confidential mechanism available to them to escalate and resolve. There is also a discipline policy available to properly deal with the offender. And if you want to call us, call Swami Atma Muktananda or Ahimsa Dara at Rockland Ashram. I was pretty appalled by that. Then we came to Terry. Terry talked a lot. He thinks he's shit hot, thinks he's got the answer to everything. Really didn't spend any time discussing what I hoped we would be discussing, which is about what I'm talking about today. He did come and meet with me and my family, spent a day here in Melbourne with us, where we dissected my entire life, mostly focusing on childhood trauma, which had nothing to do with the ashram. It was kind of useful. It was basically free family therapy, great, but it really had nothing to do with the ashram, and it really didn't help in any way my issue with the ashram. He was a well-meaning guy. But sometime later, so that was in September 2014, around the time of the Royal Commission, he told me about the Royal Commission that was going to happen he told me in November, and he told me that he didn't have time to work with me because he was so busy with the Royal Commission. Didn't tell me that he expected to be a witness. He just basically didn't have time for me, was the message. And I had been trying to convey to him quite specific actions that I wanted him to take. He had made some pretty big promises to me. One was that he was going to arrange for someone to conduct an independent investigation into the ashram's handling of my case. He also promised me that he could ensure that I never have to have any contact with again. And when I communicated with him that I wished him to pursue the offer of an independent review for the purposes of making people at the ashram understand what had happened and how much they'd fucked up. At that point he just actually didn't have time because he was so busy with the Royal Commission. I never heard from him again. He never got back to me. Well, it must have been early this year. I discovered through the records of the Royal Commission that he had sent an email about me to... there's communications here between you, Yoga, and Terry, and I gather there was probably other people who were privy to this, maybe. At the top it says the Working Together group. Bert Franzen is mentioned there too. But this communication specifically between Yoga Sundan and Terry. So he talks about me and his engagement with me. And I was really shocked when I read this email, because he sent it in May 2014, which was well before I'd ever agreed to work with him. And I had, right from the start, specifically questioned him on confidentiality, and he'd assured me that he would never discuss details of my case with any of people at Mangrove. I see it as a bit deceptive because I think he's probably trying to convey to you, Yoga, that he's talking about one of the ashram kids, when in fact he's talking about me. I just can't believe the way he writes about me. The thing that really annoyed me was that he sent you my poem, my Fuck You poem, which I know you've all read. And the reason that really annoyed me that he sent that to you without my permission was that you knew that poem and you knew that it was by me. So in the act of doing that, through his sheer stupidity, he completely broke all confidentiality, because you knew that the person he was talking about in this email was me. It was not a confidential report on a victim. I don't know if I really want to read the whole thing, but basically the whole thing is him painting me as this poor victim and him as this hero on a white horse who's going to save me. And his perspective on our interactions is so warped, it's not funny. He, says things like this person was so engaged with him that he kind of like was wanting to end the conversation and he kind of couldn't, and it's like he just wouldn't shut up. Like seriously, you guys know what he's like. He's fucking he's just like his perspective on me and his interactions with me is just so far from my perception that but the whole confidentiality thing really pissed me off. I've made a brief outline of what I believe my lost earnings have been through having had to leave my job at Manly Yoga and start afresh with nothing here in Melbourne. I've estimated that over the last 4.5 years to be $162,180. I've also had costs of various therapies that I have paid for. Some has been paid for by yourselves, and Manly Yoga also contributed to some of my trauma therapy. But there have been other costs of therapy that I have paid for, that my mum has paid for, costing about $10,000 over the last 4.5 years. Did you want to say anything more about that?
Well, I guess about that lack of capacity that Prem had when she came to Melbourne to function just with interactions with family and friend, had, of course, complete impact on her capacity to earn a living for herself. So for quite some time she was living on her earnings and I was supporting her. So
you mean on my savings?
On your savings. Yeah. And I guess it wasn't something that we really had thought about a great deal. Our greatest concern was for Prem's voice to be heard and for people to hear about her experience. And it only really occurred to us the economic impact as well as the emotional impact really only occurred to us very recently. In fact, I think it was probably last night that we suddenly thought, well, hang on here.
And that's an ongoing impact. Like,
yes.
My earning now is still less than half of what I was earning when I was working at Manly Yoga.
I think Prem said she was sort of a broken, did you use the
broken
person
yeah.
when she left Manly and came to Melbourne. She would have been struggling to find any sort of employment to earn a wage. She just was so emotionally damaged. And unfortunately, because as she's gone through, the interactions happened over such a long period of time, there was this continual impact and continual trauma as each of these events occurred. So, yes, even though compensation wasn't something that was our initial thought, it definitely is something that I think we also felt was important for you to hear, that there has been that huge economic impact.
So when the Royal Commission happened, I made a statement on Facebook saying that I thought it was great that it was happening, and I received a phone call from Swami Surya Murti. She threatened me. She warned me from saying anything positive about the Royal Commission. She warned me off naming people that I hoped would be questioned. She was particularly protective of Atma. She told me that my teacher's accreditation could be removed. She told me my teacher's affiliation could be removed. She told me that my rights to visit Rockland could be removed. She threatened me with these things and told me that I should watch what I say. I reported that to Terry and to the Royal Commission, and I think Terry contacted you, but of course, given that history, I wasn't interested in talking to you about it. I have had quite a bit of communication with the Royal Commission. They were very interested in my story to the point where they asked me to meet with them, and they came down to Melbourne in their preparations for the Royal Commission hearing, and I met with two of their lawyers for, 3 hours or something. I don't know how long it was, but yeah, we met and they wanted to hear my perspective on my experience of the organisation and the culture, because they saw it as very relevant to their investigation. So I gave them as much help as I could. Every time that lawyer who represents the ashram makes a public statement or a media statement, I wish someone would, because seriously, he's just said he's so wrong, and it's really everything that he says is incredibly offensive. Like even just recently, I don't know, it was only like a week ago or something, you guys sent out some email and it was some statement from this lawyer completely attacking Bhakti, one of the victims, and all of that, like this stuff just is so triggering and so offensive. I really appreciated the fact that you, Surya, and Yoga both were at the Royal Commission, and I appreciated quite a bit of what you said, Surya. seems to me that the lawyer representing the ashram has a very different perspective and seems to say a lot of things that are very contradictory. So I'm a little confused about where the ashram stands on these things. Most recently, up until yesterday, you were conducting community meetings to consult about the way forward for Satyananda-yoga or for the ashram or whatever. And the two meetings here in Victoria, one hosted by Kriya Vijaya, the other by Suryamurti, two people who have, who I'm not prepared to be in the company of, given the way that they treated me. So even up until today, I have been excluded from that community consultation process, purely through those people being the hosts of those events. Oh yeah, and by the way, Kriya Vijaya has never ever spoken to me about any of this. I've never received an apology. And yeah, I believe she was pretty instrumental in me losing some friends. I would like to see, I always wanted the ashram to make some kind of statement about having his teacher's accreditation cancelled and his rights to visit the ashram removed. I guess as you can see from what I've told you today, the fact that a lot of people still don't even know has put people in danger. And I think that it would have been appropriate for people to receive some notification from SYA as to what had happened. But that never happened.
During this meeting, those who were present listened respectfully without interrupting. They were suitably moved and at the end expressed, I believe, genuine empathy. There was some discussion, which was unrecorded, during which it was casually mentioned that the perpetrator had been present at their community meeting held in Northcote the previous day. Not only is he back in Melbourne, but no one had bothered to tell me. And the organisers of that meeting, Kriya Vijaya and the managers from Mangrove Ashram, knew that he intended to go to that meeting and they had granted him permission to attend. I was extremely upset, re-traumatised all over again. I left the room immediately and called an end to the meeting. In subsequent communications, the ashram managers told me that hearing my story had changed everything for them, and they acknowledged that it was completely wrong of them to allow him to attend their meeting. They are starting to get it and are trying to make positive changes. But they are operating within an entrenched rape culture where perpetrators are supported and protected while victim survivors are ostracised and blamed.